Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in AP English, and we turn now in our study of Dante's Infernos to Canto number 12. This one is Circle 7, round number 1, the violent against neighbors. After you finish your study of Canto 11, really in many ways it's all downhill from here. Quite literally it is downhill, and I think as well, once you've made it through the 11th canto of the Divine Comedy Inferno, you really are on your way, and so I'm hoping that you'll feel somewhat comfortable at least now in the lay of the land, especially after we've studied in Canto 11 what that lay of the land, the cartography of the afterlife in Inferno kind of looks like. Now, if you haven't been following our stuff, very much recommend that you hit learnstrong.net, go to the AP folder. My assumption is that you've been following our lectures from Homer, from the Iliad, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, as well as Virgil's Aeneid, all the way up through and including our study of St. Augustine's Confessions. We've also given individual lectures on each of the previous 11 cantos. Let's just summarize where we've been really quickly. In Canto 1, we are in April 7, 1300, Good Friday, the day of Good Friday. 35-year-old Dante, the pilgrim, is on his way, lost in the wood of error, the dark wood of error. He wants to climb the hill, the mountain up to God, but he is not allowed because of three animals, the leopard, the lion, the wolf. Then all of a sudden Virgil shows up. In Canto 2 we have the invocation of the Muse, and Virgil will let Dante know that it's Beatrice who has actually sent him to give him help, and Dante will say, okay, let's go to work. In Canto 3 we have the inscription of hell, abandon hope all ye who enter here. We have the uncommitted there of Acheron, we will see, and then finally at the end of Canto 3, Dante will fade after seeing Acheron. Then we will, in Canto 4, have Limbo, which is the very first circle of hell. This is the unbaptized pagans. Homer, Virgil, Aristotle is included there. In Canto 5, Circle 2, we have the jacked lovers. Dido is there, but of course Francesca and Paolo are the ones that have the important prominence in Canto 5. In Canto 6, we have Circle 3, the gluttons. Chaco is mentioned, giving us prophecies of Florence as well as final judgment. In Canto 7, this is Circle 4, the prodigals and the avaricious. They're pushing rocks around. And then in Circle 5, as well in Canto 7, we have the Styx, the wrathful and the sullen. They cannot speak or articulate clearly. In Canto 8, we have Philygis, which is going to take them across the river Styx with Felipe Agenta. They are trying to make comments, and Dante, the pilgrim, for the first time will really kind of lay into one of the guys that's there. We come to the city of Dis, but not allowed in. This is the beginning of Circle 6, obviously. In Canto 9, we have the gates of Dis opened by an angel, and then they will enter officially Circle 6, which is the area of the heretics. Dante's conversation with Farinata and Cavalcante will happen in Canto 10. We just finished with Canto 11, where Virgil will give kind of a map of the rest of hell, and the influence of Aristotle cannot be overstated. Now again, the key here is that you're reading on your own and using me as a reference. Our learning theory is vital for us, that desire to connect new information to old information in meaningful ways. In our reading theory and our annotative approach, again, we will ask 3 guiding questions. Level 1, what does the text say? Level 2, what does the text mean? At 2A, themes, messages. At 2B, the rhetorical level of reading, we're looking specifically at symbolism and irony, and we're asking about Dante as both poet as well as politician and philosopher. Let's do a real quick summary now. Just to finish our 3 levels of reading. In level 3, we're always asking, how can I relate this information to other information that I know? At 3A, obviously relating to the stuff we've already studied in AP, starting with the Iliad, ending with St. Augustine's Confessions. And then finally, how can I relate to this information in some kind of meaningful way? What will happen now after Canto 11? What will happen now is that we will have circle after circle, canto after canto, where Dante the pilgrim will meet different kinds of sinners who have done different kinds of sins in their life and are being punished for that in the afterlife. And so we're going to obviously have some attempt to try to relate personally to this information. Now let's do a brief plot summary of Canto 12. We go past the Mentor to the Centaurs, these half-human, half-animal kinds of critters. And then finally, Nicias will lead them to Philation, which is the river of blood, and there we will see those who are violent against neighbors. Let's turn now in our study of Robert Penske's translation and Canto number 12. The outlike place we came for our descent down the steep bank was one no eye could seek because of what was there. This side of Trent there is a place. A landslide fell and struck the Aegis flank. Because of the unstable ground or earthquake, rocks once tumbled from the peak and formed a passage where people can descend. By the way, this area outside of Trent, Salvini del Marco, is the area, and it had been there long before Dante was even born. Okay, so it's interesting that Dante the poet, put this in your notes, likes every once in a while to make a reference that is very concrete, that others who are, of course, Florentines reading this will understand, right? And we've seen this several times already. Monteperti is mentioned in other kinds of places like that. So on we go now. Such was the footing we had down that ravine. And at the broken chasm's edge, we found the infamy of Crete, the Minotaur, conceived within the false cow's shell. Now, this is one more example of the way Dante writes a line and assumes so much from his audience. Put it in your notes at 3A. T.S. Eliot will play the exact same game as well before him. Milton in Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained. Same kind of thing, where, well, everyone knows who we're talking about with the Mentor. King Minos' wife, Festia, will fall in love with the white bull and will tell Daedalus, the inventor, to make her a wooden horse. She crawls inside the wooden horse. We're familiar, obviously, with the Trojan horse analogs. And then we'll have sex with this horse. That will produce the Minotaur, which is half human, half beast. It's here, of course, that we are talking about the infamy of Crete conceived within the false cow shell. When the Minotaur, he saw us come his way, and he bit himself in rage like one insane. By the way, this biting of yourself, we've seen several times in Dante's day. It was already kind of construed as evidence that you've kind of gone nuts, or you're really, really upset if you bite yourself. Okay? My master called. Perhaps you think you see the Duke of Athens, Theseus, right? The one who dealt you death up in the world. Theseus, of course, with Ariadne's help, as we know from our story, from our early studies of Edith Hamilton's mythology, will together help kill the Minotaur, right? He says it, beast, take yourself away. This is no man your sister, Ariadne, taught. In truth, he has come here to witness your punishment. Now, this is interesting that the word witness gets used here, because in many ways, this is what Dante the poet is wanting Dante the pilgrim to help you, the reader, who is involved in this journey along with Dante the pilgrim, do. That is to say, to witness, to see, to watch. Notice how many times, I mean, you could do something fascinating and just go back to the last 11 cantos, and every time sight or seeing come into play, underline it. You'll be stunned how many times Dante is playing the game of seeing, right? Witnessing, if you will. As a bull breaks loose. Now we're going to get an interesting epic simile that will remind us very much of the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid. That as so, watch this. As a bull breaks loose in the death blows aftermath and plunges back and forth, but though unspent, cannot go forward. So did the Minotaur act. My wary guide cried, run to the descent, go quickly. While he's raging, this is one of the moments when Dante will have to hurry, hustle, run. So we picked our way down over a rubble of scattered stone that shifted under me often as I walked, with the new weight. While I was climbing down, I thought to myself, and soon my master said, suggestions maybe that Virgil can read Dante's mind, you may be thinking about this ruined terrain, guarded by the feral rage that I defied and quelled just now. Know then, in other words, you may be asking, what's going on with all of this stone, this stony rubble, to quote T.S. Eliot, that is here. Know then, he says, that other time I journeyed here, back to Canto 9, lines 19 through 29, when you'll remember the witch and Reachthio is going to have compelled Virgil, supposedly, to have gone all the way down into the very pit of hell to take a journey there. I journeyed there. This rock had not yet slid. It must have been a little before He, now we're to Jesus Christ, the harrowing of hell, from Canto 4, lines 35 through 51. Notice how Dante is beginning to draw on information from earlier in the poem. He came to this, if I have reckoned rightly, to take the great spoil up the upper circle with him, when the deep fetid valley began to shake. Now we're talking about that famous shaking of the earth, that earthquake of Matthew 27:51 in the Gospel of Matthew. It began to shake everywhere, so that I thought the universe felt love, the force that has brought chaos back many times over, say some philosophers. And again, this is one of those things where Dante drops a hint that you're going to have to be a pretty educated reader of Dante's day, and even of today, to understand what he's talking about. Here we're talking about Empodoles, who made an argument that when there is hatred that runs the world, we have order. When there is love that runs the world, we invariably have chaos. And this is one of those kind of ideas that obviously is extremely controversial, but maybe worthy of thinking about, because everything is about its opposite. And at that moment, this ancient rock, both here and elsewhere, tumbled to where it now appears. But keep your eyes below us, for coming near is the river of blood. Phalagium, it will get named by Canto 14. Not in this canto, but by 14. It will be named Phalagium, the river of blood, where we will have the seventh circle, first round, the violent against neighbors, right? For coming near is the river of blood, in which boils everyone whose violence hurt others. And then, oh, now this is Dante the poet. Oh, blind desire. Oh, blind desire of covetousness. Oh, anger gone insane. Two observations. Notice how this O and this O reminds us of the Pardoner's tale at the very end when he starts preaching again, and he uses that word O over again, as we pointed out already in an earlier lecture. As well, notice this thing about desire. It reminds us of Sidney's Thou Blind Man's Mark, that famous sonnet. Thou blind man's mark, thou fool, self-chosen snare, fond fancy, scum and dregs of scattered thought, bane of all evil, cradle of causeless care. Remember what he says in that poem? Desire, desire, I have too dearly brought, with price of mangled mind they worthless wear, desiring not but how to kill desire. Notice the interesting dichotomy about desire. It's not that desire is bad, it's what you desire for Dante. If you desire God and God's way, that is good. If you desire evil and things for yourself, selfishness, narcissism, that is bad. And of course, desiring to jack somebody else even more. Oh, blind desire of covetousness. Oh, anger gone insane, that goad us on through life, which is so brief. If there is an argument of a propedeutic that's central and a motif all the way through the Inferno and the Divine Comedy, it is that life is short, but afterlife is long. Write that one down. It's an important one. Life is short, but afterlife is long. You know, people often say life is short, right, and all of that. But the reality is that for Dante, afterlife is not short. Afterlife is long. Okay? So life is so brief. To steep in eternal woe when life is done. Notice again, life which is so brief. It's sad, he said, to steep in eternal woe when life is done. Oh, he says, how tragic it is that for that brief period of time, people live in such a way, in this case violent against neighbors, that they end up having to spend an entire eternity in woe. I saw a broad moat bending in a curve, encircling the plain, just as my guide had said. Between the moat and the bottom of the cliff, centaurs, these half-men, half-horse critters, who were armed with bows and arrows, sped in file as on a hunt they might be found when they were in the world. By the way, this is an example of that insane bestiality of Aristotle back earlier in Canto 11, lines 78 through 86. Classic example of this, right? When we appeared, they halted, and three came forward from the band with bows and shafts they chose, held ready to aim. One hailed us from a distance. You who descend the hillside, for what torment have you come? Tell us from here, if not, I draw my bow. And then, Virgil, we will make answer to Charon. Now, Charon here is, we're going to find, the teacher of Achilles, which is kind of fascinating. My guy told me, who is beside you? You always brought yourself woe because your will was hasty. In other words, Virgil says, you don't be shooting us. Don't be hasty. You're always making mistakes. In other words, the centaurs themselves are examples of violence and actions of violence being taken that are too hasty. Interesting allegory, right? He nudged me and said, that one is Nissus, he who met his death through Darinia, and by himself satisfied vengeance for himself. Now, here again, this is from Ovid's Metamorphoses 9, Darinia and Hercules, man and wife. Dionysius wants to have the experience of Darinia, and in the process, he gets jacked. But before he dies, he makes this coat, this robe that has poison on it. You're familiar with this story, and that's how Hercules gets jacked, right? In other words, this is the vengeance that the centaur took. The middle one, whose gaze is directed at his breast with lowered head, is the great Chiron, the one that he spoke to, tutor of Achilles, and the other is Phoebus. Now, Phoebus, while mentioned in mythology, very, very lesser centaur, and the last that we hear of him. But we're told full of rage. What is it that these centaurs all share in common? Well, they're full of rage in the same way that people who are in the seventh circle are full of rage and violence, right? But notice, the centaur's job, we're told, they circle the moat by thousands. If any soul should rise out of the blood more than its guilt makes lawful, they pierce it with their arrows. So notice the punishment here is violent offenders in the river of blood, Flagium, will be shot at by these archers who are centaurs, who themselves are, of course, products of serious violence. As we came close, Charon drew a beautiful touch here for the poet. Charon drew an arrow's notch back through the tangle of beard along his jaw to clear a space for his large mouth. And to the others he said, in other words, he uses the notch of the arrow to kind of move away his beard so he can speak. Have you observed how that one steps displace objects his body touches? In other words, he is not a shade. He is alive. He's a real human being. Feet of the dead are not accustomed to behave like that. And my good leader, who by this time stood quite near the centaur's chest, just opposite the place where Charon's two natures joined, man and horse, right, replied, speaking of Dante the Pilgrim, he is indeed alive, and in that state, alone. Interesting, because we paid attention in our study of Virgil's Aeneid about how Aeneas is constantly alone. It falls to me to be his guide through the dark valley. This will be interesting because we're actually going to have the guide to the guide here in a second. Watch this. It is necessary and not his pleasure that puts him on this road. In other words, he doesn't really have a choice. He's not here for pleasure. He's here because he's got to learn something. Dante's ability as poet to remind us. From singing Alleluia, Beatrice, one came to me to give me this strange mission. Why strange? Dante never actually says. He is no thief, nor I a spirit given to larceny. In other words, we're not here to steal. We're here for a real purpose. But by the power, notice we never say God, but by the power that lets me walk a path so savage, give us a member of your pack to come along as companion to us both and show us where the ford is, and on his back carry this one who, not a spirit, cannot fly through the air. Then Charon turned and spoke, bending his torso towards Dionysius on his right. Go back and guide them, then, and take away the challenge of any other troops you meet. Now with a trusty escort, we made our way along the boiling crimson, those boiled inside, shrieking beside us. So you got boiling blood with people screaming who are violent against their neighbors. Dionysius will be the guide to Virgil, the real guide, with Dante the Pilgrim behind. So now we've got three. We've got our trinity. On some it came so high, the blood, it covered their eyebrows. The mighty centaur said, this is Dionysius now instructing, these are the tyrants given to blood and plunder. Here they lament the merciless harm they did. And now he begins to point out some of them. Notice he's taking the role that normally Virgil plays. Here's Alexander. Now, it's either Alexander the Great that's being mentioned here, or possibly scholars think maybe more the Thessalian tyrant from 350 BCE, okay? Here's Alexander, and he who held Sicily under for many a sad year. That is to say, this tyrant, maybe. Fierce Dionysius is here. Now, we're not talking about Dionysius the god, right? We're talking about the tyrant of Syracuse from 405 to 367 BC. That black hair there is Alonso's. These are famous tyrants of Dante's day. And yonder, that other fair head is Obezius of Estes. Again, tyrants, right? In the world above. The man, his stepson, Azio, smothered Obesi to death, slew. I turned toward the poet, whose answer was, in other words, hey, he's doing your job for you, Dante the Pilgrim. In other words, he is wanting to show proper respect. Notice the humility of Virgil, though. And Virgil will say, let him be first guide, I your second. Now, notice, they've been together now so long that Dante doesn't have the pilgrim. Dante the pilgrim doesn't have to speak. Virgil knows exactly what he's saying. When Dante looks at him, in other words, hey, how come he's getting to tell me all this instead of you? Virgil says, don't worry about it. Let him be the guide for now. I'll be second. I'll take second place. A little further on, the Centaur stopped at a crowd seeming to rise from the boiling flow up to the throat. So now it's up to their throat, right? He showed us one, and now this is the character named Guy de Montfort from 1271, who killed Prince Henry of Cornwall, and the mythology was that Prince Henry's chest was open, his heart taken out, put in a box, and set by the River Thames. He showed us one who kept off to one side, and then within the bosom of God he stabbed another's heart, and it has dripped blood ever since upon the Thames. He said, I saw some others whose head and even chest came up above the stream, and in that crowd were many I recognized. Which, of course, if you're a Florentine, you're going, oh no, am I going to be the next one named here, maybe? The blood decreased, sinking by more and more until it cooked only the feet, and then it was where we crossed, right? That's where they crossed at. To hear, now quoting, you have seen the boiling stream contract, he said. This is Dionysius. From here, its bed grows deeper again till it completes its circle to reconnect with where God's justice makes the tyrants groan. Again, we're back to this notion of justice is what drives Inferno. It goads Attila, of course, Attila the Hun, right? We think of Attila from 434 to 453, right? A scourge on earth. And Pyrrhus, the son, the Ptolemus, the son of Achilles, and Sextus. This was Pompey's great pirate son, Sextus. And there also are eternally drawn the tears, unlocked by boiling, milked from the eyes of Reiner Pazzo and Renier de Correntino. These are both highway robbers of Dante's time, the people of Dante's time would know. Men who brought such warfare to the public ways that he turned back and crossed the ford again.